So I'm thrilled to be joined today by Dr. Alejandra Pascal Garrido, who's been studying plant-based material cultures in wild chimpanzees since 2006 and chimpanzee termite fishing traditions in Tanzania for the last decade. Her interdisciplinary approach bridges primatology, archaeology, and anthropology to elucidate how these customs emerge, are maintained, and transmitted across generations. By combining methods from archaeological sciences with insights from ethology, biomechanics, entomology, and botany, she's contributing to build a new understanding of the so-called archaeology of the perishable, providing relevant comparative insights into early hominin technologies that rarely preserve the archaeological record. She's got a fantastic-looking talk for us today. And Alejandra, take it away.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that presentation. I was about to start with some audio of chimpanzees calling, but I don't think you can listen this. So based on that, I will start the talk by calling like chimpanzees. So that's my starting of this talk, given that we are going to be immersing ourselves into the life of chimpanzees. So, but I would like to start this talk by talking about how we use tools every day of our lives. So if we think about it, we use phones, computers, maps, you name it. And unlike any other animal species, our survival depends on the use of these tools. So asking ourselves how we became these highly technological species is actually asking how we became humans. So one thing we can do is to start to look at the archaeological record. When we look at the archaeological record, what we see is that early humans have been using tools for at least 3.3 million years. And then onwards, they continued using these stone tools for for different functions. And these tools became more and more complex with time. But when we look at these very primitive tools, these very early tools, what we see is that our ancestors, they had a really good understanding of how to make these tools. They had really good technical and cognitive skills. And one of the skills they had that was very important is to be able to choose the right materials to make the right tools. And they were able to efficiently make this because they had this ability. For example, when they were producing cutting tools, they would use materials that were easy to fracture. So with time, this technical ability evolved to the production of more complex tool types, the use of broader type of materials, from bows and arrows to needles to pottery, and then arriving to the complex technology on which we depend today. And just as an example of how much we have developed our technical skills and the extent to which we have taken our ability to use these tools, just see this picture where you can see a wood carver doing his daily job. And if you have a quick look, you can see the probably more than 100 tools that are here that we can see. So we talked about these first stone tools and the importance of these stone tools on everyday human life, but plants were as important in everyday human life, and not only as to be used as raw material for tools, but also plants were important as food and as medicine. So plants had a very important role in our early days, in the early life of humans. But what happens is that when we look at the archaeological record, what we see is that, yes, we have a record of stones as early as 3.3 million years ago. However, in comparison, the first convincing evidence of tools made from wood date back only to less than half a million years ago. So 476,000 years old is the oldest wooden tool that we have in record. So this is actually limiting our understanding of how we became technological. And just to give you an analogy, just think, let's say we have an anthropologist in the future who is asked to describe the social lives of millennials based on their written letters. And this is the record that the anthropologist would probably get, a black box, because there will be no traces of their emails, their phone conversations, their WhatsApp messages. So what I'm saying here is that our reliance on stone tools is limiting what we know about the lives of these early hominins. So the big question is what has happened during those first 3 million years of our own evolution? And can we think that the first making of those stone tools was a cognitive leap suddenly in the early hominins, or was part of a continuum of a way that already existed before these 3 million years? To think that plants were not used as tools by our earlier ancestors is highly unlikely to think that could be true. Why? Because when we look at the lives of our closest living relatives, and when we look at the lives of the modern hunter-gatherers, what we see is that plants are used as tools by them in a wide range of contexts. And in this case, chimpanzees actually can provide very good information regarding plant technology simply because they use a lot of plant tools, as we will see in the coming slides. So when we look at our evolutionary history of all great apes, including humans, because we are great apes, what we see is that chimpanzees and bonobos are our closest living relatives. We have shared with them a last common ancestor between 5 to 7 million years ago. Therefore, when we study chimpanzees, we are opening a window into our own evolutionary past. And one thing that is important and that we assume as scientists is that anything that a modern chimpanzee can do was probably within the capabilities of our last common ancestor. So that's why we're going to talk about chimpanzees. And for that, I'm going to give a little intro about their lives. So chimpanzees are actually have the widest distribution of any non-human great ape species. They occur across Africa, across a large range of habitats, and we have 4 different subspecies of chimpanzees, basically the Western chimpanzees, the Cameroonian or Nigerian Cameroonian chimpanzee, the Central African chimpanzees, and then the Eastern chimpanzees. And what we see is that across all 4 subspecies, the use of plant technologies is ubiquitous. It's not the same in every part, but to a larger or less extent, they are all using plant tools. And this is very different in comparisons to their use of stone tools, which only occurs in a few populations in West Africa. And actually, when we look at these communities where they are both using plants and stone tools, what we see is that their use of plant tools is actually a lot more common than their use of stone tools. So they use plant tools a lot more than they use stone tools. And actually, their use of plants is not only important as tools, but as in early hominins, chimpanzees use plants for a lot of different things. For example, chimpanzees use plants to communicate. In this case, they drum on this buttress of very big trees. Plants are very important because chimpanzees are largely frugivorous, so they depend on these plants for survival. Plants are used for comfort. In this case, Glama here did a daily nest to rest more comfortably during the day. Chimpanzees use plants for playing. Look at this. Here we have, they are playing and they're hanging on vines and chasing each other. And plants are also used as medicine, as you may have seen recently, the study by Elodie Freeman, who was everywhere in the BBC, where she shows that chimpanzees are using these plants for medicine, even for they use for wounds and for medicine. Yes, so plants are prevalent and are very important, but perhaps the more remarkable use of plants is how they use these plant materials to make tools. And they use plant tools in different contexts. For example, for communication, they put leaves inside their mouths and they make sounds to attract mates. They use plants to clean themselves, but perhaps the most complex and diverse use of plant tools is for foraging, and especially for foraging on social insects. And this is important because the consumption of insects has been largely overlooked by the paleoanthropological community, which has always equal faunivory with meat eating. But when we look at the consumption of insects, insects are consumed to a larger or lesser extent by all primates, and of course are consumed by many human society. So we can say that the consumption of insects is a very ancient trait, and probably these early humans were using similar technologies that we see chimpanzees using today to harvest these insects. So chimpanzees will eat different social insects and solitary insects, but in this case, when we look at this slide, what I want to show is that how different these tools are. And this is basically because these tools are used for different functions. For example, here, this is a tool that Glama did for honey dipping. So she made this very sturdy and strong tool to break a honeybee nest. The second picture shows termite fishing prows, which you can see are thinner and more flexible because they have to be inserted into a termite mound. The third picture is their army ant dipping wands. So these are quite long. Why? Because army ants are very aggressive. So chimpanzees they actually make these tools very long so that they stay away they avoid being bitten by the army ants. The last picture shows ant fishing rods, and these, as you can see, they are small and very thin because they are used to fish ants from little holes on the trees. So what it shows is that chimpanzees seem to have an understanding that to make an efficient tool, you need to use the right material. And let's look at some videos to also see how this more clearly. So in this video, what we see is this is the community of Nigeria. is a community, the Kwano community that lives in Gashaka-Gumti National Park in Nigeria, is the community I study for my PhD. And what we see here is a female trying to get into a stingless bee nest, which is very hard because it's made of bitumen. So you can see she's using a very hard stick. The infant there steals the tip, she doesn't mind. And she needs what we call a lot of power, actually, and she actually uses her mouth as well. So you can see how the structure of the nest defines the material and the type of tool that you need to use. In this other video that I want to show, here what's happening, this is in Central Africa, and look at how this female is pounding on a honeybee nest, which is located on a tree. If you see that female is carrying an infant, so you can see how skillful they are. And look at the size of that tool that she had to make. And this is basically because of the structure of that honeybee nest. But today, we're going to look at termites. So termites are actually one of the favorite chimpanzee prey. And not only it's a favorite prey for chimpanzees, but termites are actually consumed by many animals in the forest, including aardbaks, baboons, pangolins. And of course, this is not surprising because termites, there are millions of termites inside a termite mound. Therefore, it constitutes a very sought after resource. Chimpanzees and these other animals, they mostly consume termites from the genus Macrotermes, which is the ones I am showing in this picture. And actually, also, these termites are consumed by humans. And actually, this is perhaps not surprising. Termites constitute a delicatessen in many human societies, including in Tanzania, where I am now. And this is not surprising because termites provide a great source of mineral, vitamins, protein, fat. Therefore, it's an excellent source of nutrients. So it's therefore not surprising that chimpanzees are also making tools to harvest these termites. And here you see Tom. Tom is using what we call the simple termite fishing technique, which actually what it consists is inserting a simple probe into an exit hole of a termite mound. And then the soldiers that are inside the termite mound, as a mechanism of defense, will bite the tool, and then the tool is retrieved with all these soldiers. Termite fishing can go on for hours. As you can see, the same tool is used several times. And just have a look at the tool, like it looks quite flexible. And Tom is being very successful at getting a lot of termites, and he will continue doing that until there's no more termites on that hole, and then he will change to another hole. He's actually looking around, maybe checking if there are any other chimpanzee coming. So when we look at termite fishing, it actually may look very simple, but it is not simple. And actually, it takes many years for chimpanzees to learn this technique. And basically, chimpanzees, they learn this technique from watching their mothers. So mothers actually are the primary role for learning, and they're the ones who are transmitting this technique across generations. Today, we're going to go to Gombe. So Gombe is actually maybe is very known by many of you. And this is because it was in Gombe where Jane Goodall first went out to the forest to study wild chimpanzees, and where she first described the use of tools by a non-human animal, which actually was termite fishing. So where is Gombe? Gombe is located in the western part of Tanzania. Chimpanzees in Tanzania are largely actually occur in the western part of the country, and Gombe represents the tip northern end of that distribution. It's not a very big park. It's a 35 square kilometers national park, but it's where actually the place where the chimpanzees have been studied for the longest now, for more than 60 years. And when we look at the habitat, actually the habitat is mostly thicket woodland and open woodland, in less proportion vine tangles and close forest. But I wanted to show this picture just so that you realize how many plants there is in a forest. And if you're going to make the right tools, you will have to choose which plants you have to use that will provide you with the raw material. So there's a big offer of plants here. So I have been studying termite fishing in Gombe for more than 10 years now. And what my studies have shown is that chimpanzees are very selective of the kind of raw material they use to make these tools. So they prefer to use mostly bark, which they detach from different parts of plants. In less proportion, they also use quite a lot of twigs. And in less proportion, they use vines and sometimes grass. And the very interesting thing that what I was able to see while I was studying this community of chimpanzees in Gombe is that these materials were obtained from a very limited number of plants. So that picture I showed with all those plants in a forest, they are actually using 10 species or 12 species to obtain these materials. And so they have a high selection of material and plant species to make these termite fishing proofs. And sometimes they actually go out of the way to obtain these materials. As we see here, Sandy has been fishing on a termite mound, and she wanted to obtain material from a specific plant species that is quite popular in Gombe. Why? Because that plant provides long, flexible material from which you could make good termite fishing tools. So you saw her transporting that material from quite a few meters. I think it was 5 or 6 meters. And then she uses that material to make the tool and start fishing. So you could see that she had a lot of plants around her, but she wanted to actually select that particular species. So from here, we actually thought that this selection was perhaps not surprising, simply because termite fishing props need to be flexible in order to penetrate the convoluted termite tunnels. So termite tunnels inside are made from twisting tunnels. So what happens is, if you would use a human tool, this is a tool that I made intentionally from what I thought was a very bad material, which is a thick tool. What would happen is what you see here in B is the tool will just pass by the tunnel and you will not successfully fish termites. But when we used a tool that chimpanzees have recently abandoned at the mound, and it was quite flexible, what we thought it was happening was that these tools were more easily able to bend in these convoluted termite tunnels, therefore allowing more opportunity for termites to bite. So based on these experiments we did and our observations of wild chimpanzees, we actually hypothesized that flexibility is a factor in tool material choice when it comes to make tools for termite fishing by chimpanzees. So actually to test this, we had to initiate collaboration with biomechanic experts at the Max Planck Institute of Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig and the University of Leipzig, with Adam van Kasteren and Ellen Schul-Korsnas. And then we also, it was a team of chimpanzee experts like myself, Susana Carvalho from Sibio at the University of Faro, and Ikarev at the University of Algarve, and Deus Mjungu at the Jane Goodall Institute in Tanzania. So all of us designed this research, which actually what involved is I had to learn how to test mechanical properties of materials in the forest. So I traveled to Leipzig and I learned how to use this machine. This is what we call a universal testing machine. And what it actually works is you put your sample here, and then a force is exerted from above. And that force, what it does, it bends that sample, and how much force it needs to take until that material bends gives you what is called the flexural rigidity. So basically, when you have the flexural rigidity is determined by how stiff a material is. So when you have lower values, it means the material is flexible, and when you have higher values, the material is stiffer, it's more rigid. So I learned how to use this, and then what I did is I went back to Gombe with this machine, and I spent 90 days, and I took a lot of samples from different mounds, nearby mounds that have been fished by chimpanzees. And I actually emulated how chimpanzees are removing these materials, because I have observed them for a long time. Instead of removing the material with teeth, I use a knife. I cut the sample, I put it in a Ziploc bag with water, and then took it back to camp and do all those measurements. So in total, I measured almost 200 individual plants from different species. The species I used, or I took sample, were species that we know they are used by chimpanzees, and plant species that are available but never used. And we managed to measure almost 550 samples. And the results were really nice, because what we found is, these are the results. So basically, here on the y-axis, you see the rigidity, so the flexural rigidity, so how rigid or how the material is. And here in the x-axis, here you see the median value for these in green are the plants that are used by chimpanzees to make their tools, and here in pink, the ones that are never used. And as you can see, there's a significant differences between the two of them, with the ones that are being used being significantly more flexible, because it has a lower level of rigidity. And the same applied when we looked at the popularity of species. So these in green show the most popular species, the one that all chimpanzees want to use. These ones are occasionally used by them, and these are never used, and the same applies. So the ones that are used the most are those that provide the very flexible materials. So basically, our studies show that those species that are never used provide actually materials that are 175% more rigid than those that are used. So these results actually aligns with what we predicted, that chimpanzees are actually selecting materials that are flexible, because this is enable them to more easily navigate the convoluted termite tunnels and allowing more opportunity for termite attachment. So these, of course, our results are important because they not only describe a level of complexity that we didn't know before about wild chimpanzees, that they have this kind of folk physics which enable them to choose materials that will guarantee them to make a tool more efficient, that it will be more efficient. So depending on which function. So this means that chimpanzees are not just grabbing any stick or plant that is around. They actually have an understanding that they need to grab those materials that provide the right properties to make these tools. And as you remember, when I first started the talk, I said that early hominins were actually capable of doing these tools, their stone tools, because they also had this technical skill of being able to select the right materials. So we don't know what happened during those first 3 years of hominin evolution regarding the technical skills. However, what our study shows is that some of those skills that are already described for stone tool making by early humans, they are already present in our closest living relatives. So this means that perhaps what we are seeing about their stone lithics technologies or technical skills are part of a continuum of a way of life that already preceded this stage. So our message here is that unless we start to incorporate the role of plants in actually human evolution and human technical evolution, our understanding of how we became these highly technological species will continue to be handicapped. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. And of course, the Linnean Society, who also provided funding for this work, and all these people that are here that on the slide, and the institutes that were involved, like the Max Planck Institute for Evolution Anthropology, the Dane Goodall Institute, the Donfeld Fund at the University of Oxford, the Leakey Foundation, and of course, the Linnean Society. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. That was absolutely brilliant. I know that I am full of questions, and just to remind people that the Q&A box is open. We would love to hear what you have to think or any questions you might have. I'm going to kick us off though with I'm really curious about you mentioned them learning from their mothers. Is there a particular way they tend to do that? Is it the same group to group? Is it like?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question, because actually the learning component is very important in chimpanzees. So basically, in this case, the way they are learning to use these tools is by tool transfers. So basically, tools are shared by the mothers to their infants, and then the infants start to get familiar with the type of tools and the materials, and they start trying. And depending on the communities, in this case, in East Africa, the technologies are more simple, but in Central Africa, for example, the technologies are more complex. They involve different tool types, and the time they take to learn, it's different from the time they learn from these more simple technologies. But it can take years. By, let's say, 5 years, a chimpanzee should be able to fish, use a tool and fish. So yeah, it has to do a lot with peer observation. So basically, infants observe a lot, like in that picture I showed you. And by looking also at how they are doing this, the mothers are using their tool, they copy. So they are great, they copy a lot. So yeah, that's interesting.
Brilliant, thank you. We have a question here from Kathy saying, brilliant lecture, wonderful indeed. Just on the knowledge transmission, are you saying mothers teach infants but that males as adults do not transmit their knowledge to others? In other words, is it successful knowledge transmission over time as female to female?
Yes. Really, it's not that, for example, some infants will be looking at other males using tools and learning, but basically because the infants spend most of their times with their mothers, the mothers are going to be the ones who are actually transmitting these behaviors, because the infants are taking their tools from their mothers. But if there's a male in the group, let's say a family arrives to a termite mound and there's females or males, they can also observe others, including males, but they will most likely be observing their mothers. So yeah.
Pretty interesting. Is there any transmission between groups that we see, or does it tend to be within individual units?
Yeah, that's also very interesting. So chimpanzees, when they reach puberty, they most likely will emigrate to a new community. And what we have seen that happens many times, and actually this has happened in Gombe. So in Gombe, there is actually the most northern community, and then this community, which I have been studying, which is in the center of the park. And some decades back, the northern community was very good at fishing ants from small holes, arboreal holes. And there was one female that actually emigrated to the community located in the center where that technique was not used. And then what we believe is that this was the female who brought that new technology to that new community, because then everyone started to use that technology, which is now used by both communities. So yeah, definitely females can transfer their tool using skills to new communities.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Questions are flooding in now. We've got, are there any other properties other than flexibility that you're beginning to understand when the chimpanzees are selecting for tools, such as botanical oils or scent to attract insects on the fishing rods?
Yeah, actually, that's excellent question, because we haven't explored that, but absolutely, especially if you think about it, these tools, termites need to bite on the tools.
Mm-hmm.
And I have done experiments where I put a tool that I made and I didn't get it back because the termites would just eat it. So that's a material you should never use. But basically, also, if we think about it, plants have tannins. And I don't know what effect would that have on, for example, a termite, if a termite would actually not want to bite on a tool because of the tannin or specific components. So this is super interesting because it could be a great avenue of research to understand until, the level of the property that needs to be exactly perfect for the termites to bite. It's like fishing fish, I guess, that you need special baits. So yeah, but definitely. And also bark is great because when you make a tool from bark, it's quite wide, so you can get many termites. So actually also maybe the certain width beyond, you will not get termites. Or yeah.
We have another one. Do the chimpanzees ever reuse their tools, or are they discarded?
Yeah, great. They reused the tool. Well, like we saw in that video, Tom is using and reusing its own tool. Actually, plant tools, I've seen reuse of plant tools only a few days later. And that's simply because the plant will probably not preserve the mechanical properties that it needs. Yeah. But for example, their center is, in case of termite fishing, the probe will become, I think, not so functional. But in Central Africa, where termite fishing also includes the use of a sturdy sticks to break open a termite mound before you insert the termite fishing probe, those actually sturdy sticks are left in the mound, near the mound, and then they are used by chimpanzees. When they come, they use the same tool because, yeah, that's sturdy and it can preserve for a long time. Of course, the reuse of tools is more common in their use of stone tools when they crack nuts, but they don't make stone tools. That's a big difference. So they just select a stone, and there they reuse them all the time.
Makes sense. Got on here saying when you remove the tool material for testing, you mentioned transferring it in a bag with water. Did the water change the rigidity in any way?
No, actually, I was advised by these mechanical experts. The Ziploc bag contained a little bit of water, basically. No, it was not immersed in water, and that was to make sure the humidity was kept. The sample was measured within the largest was 3 hours after removal from the plant. So that was very important when we designed the methods to make sure that we were measuring. And that's why we had to do it in the field. We couldn't bring the samples to Leipzig because you really need the plant to do, like chimpanzees, you need to use it within a few hours, like really there.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Got one here. Do grandmothers of infants specifically have much of a teaching role?
Yes, yes. Grandmothers actually play, I think, for example, in this community, there's one chimpanzee that is 54 years old, and she's a great termite fisher. And she's still having infants. So she's a grandmother, a mother. And so they will continue transmitting these cultures, tool cultures for many generations as long as they survive. So they teach their infants, but they're always around. So if there's an infant around, that infant can watch everyone, but the infant is basically watching their mothers.
Cool. Sorry, I'm getting too wrapped up listening to your answers. I'm not actually reading ahead the next question. Oh, here's one. Apparently it's known that chimpanzees will work as a team to hunt monkeys as a food source. The question being, are they known to use tools of any sort during such hunting expeditions?
Yes. So chimpanzees hunt galagos, which are small nocturnal primates, and they do spears. This was recorded in Senegal, in West Africa, in one of the most driest places where chimpanzees occur. So these galagos occupy small cavities in tree holes. So chimpanzees are actually, they make spears to basically hunt them, in the sense that they put the spear inside the hole and to kill the prey or to remove the prey. And interestingly, these spears are also largely used by females. So yeah, they do, but it's not common. At the moment, we only have that occurring in Senegal, in West Africa.
Really cool. I had no idea they did that. Someone asked, did you see any of the chimpanzees using stone tools?
Yes. So I didn't see chimpanzees using stone tools because stone tools are actually, the use of stone tools is only happening in West Africa, in some populations in West Africa. So here where I study chimpanzees in East Africa, in Tanzania, they're not using stone tools. There are stone tools, there are stones that they could use, but they're not using them.
Okay. There's a related question here saying, you seem to be posing a hierarchy from plant tools to stone tools, but the chimpanzee colony that you mentioned that does use stone surely uses both at the same time. Is it that they're using the stone tools and plant tools for completely different tasks?
See, of course. Yes, absolutely. So you can't fish a termite with a stone, but you can crack a nut with a stone. So chimpanzees are showing us that they really understand what is the best tool for the job. They have this remarkable, they're acting as engineers and just selecting the right tool for the job. So these chimpanzees, and actually what I want to say is that each community has its own toolkit, and there's no two equal toolkits in two communities that have equal. So they're always different. So in West Africa, they use stones and they also use plant tools to make tools, but not here in East Africa.
We have one here. Within communities and from mother to infant, do there tend to be preferences displayed towards particular species of plants, or is it just the qualities of rigidity?
If they have individual preferences for certain plant species, is that the question?
Yeah. So yeah.
Yes, that's something I'm looking at. I think there are. I think like us, I think we have our own preferences when it comes to cutlery, which cutlery to use. For example, here in Tanzania, they love eating rice with spoon, and I love eating rice with fork. So we are collecting that data to see if we can find individual differences in tool material preferences, species and materials.
Interesting. It's it's a really interesting talk. Thank you. Since researchers started observing chimpanzees, have they seen any change or development in the way they use tools?
Well, the case I talked about was the one where a community starts to adopt a new tool tradition that comes from another community. But of course, they can also, I haven't seen it, but it might be possible and will probably happen that a new tool type emerges. You just need an innovator. So the innovator is that one like us, like, I don't know, the person who designed Apple or whatever. And then there's a trend that the community adopts. So once you get an innovator, it might happen that the rest of the community start to copy that innovator. I haven't seen it in my lifetime, but I'm sure, yeah, someone might, or it will happen.
Thanks to another question. I imagine it's a similar answer. Someone's asking if you have any idea how the stone use revolution started.
No. You mean in humans or in chimpanzees?
That's just what the question. I imagine they mean humans, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, in chimpanzees, we know they have been using stone tools for at least 4,300 years. And that's because they did archaeological excavations in West Africa, and the oldest stone tool used by chimpanzees was 4,300 years old, which is very little compared to hominins, 3.3 million. But that might be because, of course, hominin had a lot of archaeological, we had a lot of archaeological excavations in humans. So we might see what happened.
Oh, this is fun. Someone's wondering how the individuals get their names. Who names them? Is every individual given a name, or just those studied? And are they universally used names by people who study them?
No, actually, I think there is a paper about that. But I tell you how it happens, at least in Gombe. So when an infant is born, then there's going to be a meeting, and the people who have been studying chimpanzees, which are the chimpanzee trackers, who are incredible. They are the people who really know the life of chimpanzees, and without whom we could not do this work. So these people live in the forest every day of the year, and they know everything, a lot more than what any of us can know, simply because they spend with them every day of their lives. So they gather and people suggest names, and then there is a vote, and then the name is given. But what is interesting is that each family, so let's say the mother starts with a G, let's say gremlin. So then the daughter and the granddaughter and all that lineage will also be starting with a G.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, so for example, gremlin, Gaia, Glama, that's grandmother, mother, daughter. So then when you are in the forest, you know that when you have a female starting with G is because she belongs to the G family.
Oh, that's very cool. It's very
Yeah,
efficient.
very efficient. And then we have the F family, which is starting with an F, and it goes the same way. So you know it's much easier to know which family you are talking about.
It's really cool. I think we've got 4 more questions, then I'll probably call it.
Yes.
This really
Great.
interesting stuff.
I have questions.
Someone else, do other apes show similar tool making with plants or just
Yeah.
chimpanzees?
Yeah, so chimpanzees actually are quite unique in the way they use and make these tools, because as I said, they use these plant tools for a large variety of contexts and functions. But for example, orangutans, they also use and make small tools to eat part of a fruit, for example, or to eat insects from trees, but is not comparable to the extent that chimpanzees are using these tools. And interestingly, bonobos, which are as equally related to us, they hardly use tools for foraging, and they are not. That's why when we try to study tool use, the evolution of our technical skills, we looked more at common chimpanzees and not bonobos, because bonobos actually do not express all these forms of tool use. tool-using behavior. So chimpanzees, yeah, is the one that we can get a lot of information from.
Someone asks, do you think that if the East African chimpanzees met the West African chimpanzees and saw them using stones, they might learn from them and use stones as well?
They might. They are great. They copy a lot. And not only chimpanzees, maybe if we start cracking nuts, they will start to crack nuts with stones. Ooh. So I would not do that because ethically it wouldn't be good to introduce a new tool-use culture. Yeah, I would think, imagine even when you go to a zoo, or chimpanzees that they were brought up with families, they end up doing, grabbing a cup of coffee, doing a lot of things that humans do because they are great, they copy a lot. So yeah, most likely, I think.
There's a question here. Any ideas or suggestions as to why humans have kind of developed tool use in such leaps and bounds, while chimpanzees and other great apes seem to be, well, not doing the same?
Yeah. That's the big question. Maybe our cognitive skills, our language, and we took it to an extent, getting out of the forest, living in more open environments, all the things I could think that it's like chimpanzees actually remain more in closed forests, and then we, in our evolution, human evolution, we started to go into more open environments that might have, produce certain differences in the ecological context. But as I say, we know very little about those really ancient, primitive tool-using technologies. So early humans might have been doing this also every day of their lives. And chimpanzees have had their own evolution. It's not that we need to be the same. Each of us had their own path. So chimpanzees, maybe they don't need to use so much technology. They have bigger teeth. I don't know. So yeah, we are different.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I've got one last question. You showed the graph that some tools are used rarely or not used at all. Could you explain what does it look like when a chimpanzee abandons a tool? Like, at what point do they realize that it's no good?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's the thing that makes a chimpanzee say, okay, this tool has had enough, I'm gonna go and make new ones, because we haven't tested that. But I would think it's because once the tool is reused a few times or several times, it really starts to become less, it loses a little bit of the rigidity, because they are flexible, but they also need to be a little bit rigid so that they can be reused several times. And even me, when I'm fishing, I learned from them, and I fished a lot because I wanted to understand how this works. And after some time, you really need to do a new tool because it becomes really, it's not efficient anymore. Yeah. So yeah, I think it has to do maybe because they lose water and maybe the flexibility changes, and after a lot of reuse, it has to be changed. It's like, this is not helping anymore.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this. It was an absolutely lovely talk. I think that is, yeah, we're just about out of time. Thank you so much to everyone for coming to this lecture, and thank you so much, Alejandra, for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you so much, Scarlett, for having me, and yeah, and everyone for being here today, and of course the Linnean Society for funding my work and for inviting me to give this talk.